Hi guys, welcome or welcome back to my channel. In this video, we're gonna be making ribbon pouch. This one is very customizable, so if you want to make something small like an AirPod case or like a card wallet, or maybe you want to make something bigger for your phone or maybe a book sleeve, you can make whatever you want. You can use any type of yarn that you have at home, but I'm using a polythick yarn. This is 100% polyester yarn, and then I'm gonna be using a 3mm hook, scissors, stitch marker, snap fastener, and also needle and thread for sewing the snap fastener. So for the body of the pouch, I'm gonna give you two options. The first option is we're gonna make a thin pouch. So for example, this card wallet doesn't really have a wide base. It's pretty thin and flat and it doesn't really have that much space. And the second option is we're gonna make a pouch that has a wider and bigger base. And because of that, this one has a lot more space, so you can store a lot more things in there. Especially if you want to make a book sleeve, then I recommend to make the one with the bigger base. But if you don't need that much space, then you can just make the thinner pouch. Like me, I don't really need that much space for my cards. That's why I made the thin card wallet, so you can just adjust it wherever you want. So we're gonna start with a slip knot. So we're gonna wrap the yarn around the finger. When you flip it, there will be two lines. We're gonna hook under the first line and hook over into the second one. Let go of your finger and then you can just pull it on both sides. That's a slip knot, and we're gonna continue with chains. So for example, I'm gonna be making case for this earpod. Then I'm gonna be making chains based on the length of the earpods. Let's say if you want to make a book sleeve, then you can just make chains based on the length of the book. So I've made 9 chains and I think this one is enough for me. It will be bigger later because I'm gonna make the one with the white base. But if you're making the thin pouch, then I recommend to add more chains and make it bigger than the actual thing is, because eventually it will get smaller at the top of the pouch. When you're done, then you can just add one more chain. We're gonna skip the first chain and we're gonna start making single crochet from the second chain. So for single crochet, we're just gonna insert the hook into the chain, yarn over and pull out the yarn over and pull through the loops. That's one single crochet, and we're gonna insert a stitch marker so we know where the beginning is. And we're gonna be making single crochet for the rest of the chain except for the last one. For the last chain, we're gonna make 3 single crochet in one chain. Now depends on what you're making. If you're making the one with the bigger base, then we're gonna grab a stitch marker and place it on the first stitch. It will be very useful for the next row. But if you're making the one with the thinner base, then you can just continue making single crochet without actually marking the first one. When you're done making 3 single crochet, then we can just move to the other side of the chain and continue making single crochet except for the last chain. For the last chain, we're gonna make 2 single crochet, and just like the one before, if you're making the one with the bigger base, then we're gonna mark the first stitch. If not, then you can just make another single crochet without marking the first stitch. We are done with the first row, and now if you want to make the one with the thinner base, then you can just skip the second row and go ahead into the third row. I will put the timestamp on the video to make it easier for you. But if you want to make the bigger base, then we're gonna continue into the second row. We're gonna start with an increase on the next stitch. So for increase, we're gonna make 2 single crochet in one stitch. I just made the first single crochet and I'm gonna put the stitch marker back. Then I'm gonna make another single crochet in the same stitch. So that's 2 single crochet in one stitch. Then we're gonna continue with single crochet until you reach the stitch marker. We're gonna take off the stitch marker and we're gonna make increase for the next 3 stitches. Then we're gonna continue with single crochet until you reach the stitch marker. We're gonna take off the stitch marker and make increase for the next 2 stitches. We are done with the second row, and now for the next row, we're gonna be using the back loop only. We're gonna go ahead and make a slip stitch on the back loop. Then we're gonna continue with 2 chains. We're gonna grab a stitch marker and mark the second chain. Still on the back loop, next we're gonna make a double crochet. So for double crochet, we're gonna wrap the yarn around the hook, insert it into the stitch, yarn over and pull out the yarn. We're gonna yarn over and pull through the first and the second loop, yarn over again and pull through the rest of the loops. So that's a double crochet, and we're gonna continue making double crochet for the rest of the row. When you're done, you can just take off the stitch marker, and we're gonna be making a slip stitch on the second chain. We are done with this row, and we're gonna start the next row with 2 chains. Mark the second chain, and we're gonna continue with double crochet. This time we're gonna do it on both loops, not just the back loops only. And we're gonna continue with double crochet for the rest of the row. And basically we're just gonna repeat the same pattern until you reach the height that you needed. When you're done reaching the height that you needed, we're gonna move into the next part. So I'm gonna give you more options. The first option is you can make the pouch without a flap. So like this card wallet, it doesn't really have a lid on it. And the second option is to give the pouch a flap. This one is definitely more secure, but again it depends on what you need and what you want to make. If you want to make the one without the flap, then I'm gonna put a timestamp on the video so you can just jump over into that part of the video. But now I'm gonna tell you how to make the flap. So we're gonna make the flap on the half part of the pouch. We're gonna make it from the right side into the left side of the pouch. Since we're gonna start from the right side, we're gonna mark the left side so we know where the flap will start and end. So we're gonna start with a chain. We're gonna turn the pouch and we're gonna skip the first and the second chain. Using the front loop only, we're gonna be making double crochet. We're gonna mark the first stitch. And we're gonna continue with double crochet until there are 2 stitches left. For the last 2 stitches, we're just gonna be making a decrease stitch. So we're gonna insert the hook into the stitch. This time we're gonna use the front loop only, yarn over and pull through, and we're gonna do the same to the next stitch. There are 3 loops on your hook. We're gonna yarn over and pull through the first and the second loop, yarn over again and pull through the rest of the loops. You're done with the first row of the flap, and for the rest of the row we're just gonna be using both loops, not just the front loop only. So we're gonna continue with a chain, turn the pouch, and we're gonna skip the first and the second chain, and we're gonna start making double crochet starting from the third one. This time we're gonna use both loops. Don't forget to put the stitch marker, and we'll just continue with double crochet until there are 2 stitches left. For the last 2 stitches, we're just gonna be making a decrease stitch. It is the same as the previous row, but this time we're gonna use both loops, not just the front loops only. And that's basically the pattern for the flaps, and you can make the flap as long as you want. Like this phone wallet one, I made it until it reaches the third row. But for this small one, I'm just gonna make it until it reaches the second row. Also, one thing to consider when you are making the flap for the one with the wider base, then you actually have to consider the space that it has. When you crochet a pouch, usually they are flat because they have nothing inside. In this condition, the flap that I've made already reaches the second row. But when the pouch is actually filled, the flap that I've made haven't even reached the first row. So that is one thing that you need to be aware of. I hope you get what I'm trying to say. If you have any question, you can always ask me in the comment and I will try my best to answer it. When your flap already reaches the height that you wanted, you can just cut it off and weave in the ends. To close the flap, you can use anything you have. You can use magnets, you can use a button, but I'm just gonna use this snap fastener. And that's basically it for the flap. If you want to make it without the flap, then I'm gonna teach you how to make the lining. Because we're not gonna make the flap, we can just cut the yarn off. And next we're gonna make an invisible finish. For invisible finish, we're gonna insert the yarn into the second stitch from the last stitch. We're gonna go back into the last stitch and we're gonna insert the yarn into the back loop of the stitch. That's an invisible finish and you can just weave in the ends. For the lining, first of all, we're gonna mark a stitch that is on the far left side of the pouch and we're gonna use it for later. We're gonna start from the far right side of the pouch and this time we're just gonna use the back loop only. We're gonna insert the yarn for the lining and we're gonna make a knot to secure it. We're gonna insert the hook and start with a chain. And then we're just gonna continue with slip stitch on the back loop until you reach the stitch marker that we set before. When you reach the stitch marker, we're just gonna take it off. And on that stitch, we're gonna make 2 slip stitch. Then we're just gonna continue with a slip stitch on each stitch except for the last stitch of the row. And for the last one, we're just gonna make 2 slip stitch in 1 stitch. When you're done, you can just cut the yarn and we're gonna make another invisible finish to finish this row. I'm just gonna make the ribbon as simple as I can. So I'm just gonna start with a slip knot and then I'm gonna continue with chains. You can make it as long as you want. If you want a longer ribbon, then you can just make more chains. Just for a reference, the one that was in my phone wallet is 28 centimeters long. But again, you can make it as long or as short as you want. For this one, I'm just gonna make it 20 centimeters long. But when you're done, you can just weave in the ends. This is what it's gonna look like, and basically we're just gonna insert it into the pouch. You can literally place it anywhere you want. Maybe if you want to place it on the back or maybe even on the side, you can always do so. If you're placing the ribbon on the flap, make sure that it doesn't cover the snap fastener or the magnet that you're using. Then we're just gonna make the bow. And that's it guys, thank you for watching. Comment what should I make next and I'll see you on the next one. Bye!